When I was a kid, I used to spend hours at the piano playing around with songbooks, books of like Broadway show tunes and classic jazz standards. And as well as learning how to play those old songs, I used to love kind of taking them apart and figuring out how they worked. And although I didn't realise it at the time, that was so useful for me, because I'm not a natural musician, not by any means. I've always had to kind of sweat and struggle to get better at playing the piano. And kind of digging around in that classic old songwriting actually taught me loads about piano and music theory, kind of in an integrated way. It taught me how lots of different skills and ideas fit together. So not long ago, I thought, well, how about I take that integrated way of learning and try to show it to you guys to see if you can use it to build up your own skills at piano and music theory. So what I've done is write us kind of a demonstration song, and I've packed it out with lots of different skills and ideas, 29 of them, in fact. And what we're going to do is, first of all, have a listen to it, and then we're going to take a deep dive down into the engine room of this song and figure out how it works and what we can learn from it. Okay, let's get going. Okay, so up top here we've got an outline score of the song. It includes melody, chords and lyrics, and for those of you who are confident music readers, some suggested chord voicings and rhythmic ideas. If you'd like a copy of this score, by the way, I've put it in a PDF and uploaded it as a public access document on Google Drive, so you don't have to give me your email address or anything, just hit the link in the description text down below. Also in that PDF you'll find various other hints and tips and reminders, including keyboard diagrams for all of the main chords we're using. So if you're not a super confident music reader, take a look at those. You don't have to download the PDF to follow the tutorial, but it's there if you want it. Okay, here we go. We've got a simple scalar melody, okay, some crazy chords, but an easy key. Quite a lot of words, but they really don't mean a thing. And that's fine because I don't want much complexity, no drama or profundity. I only want a song that even I can sing. It's straightforward and unironic, with just a few non-diatonic chords that give us colour and a trip down the circle of fifths till we land on this short descending scale of C. It sounds kinda flash, but it's super easy. It has to be a song that even I can sing. Okay, an idea that I'm going to keep coming back to in this tutorial is that oftentimes music that seems somewhat complicated is actually rather simple, and that's certainly true of this song. Let's find out why. The simplicity starts with the key and the structure. So we're in the key of C major, which is about as simple as it gets, but the song actually kind of flirts with the key of A minor. In fact, the first chord under the song melody is a type of A minor chord. Now that's not weird because A minor is the relative minor key of the key of C major. Let's just dig into what that means. Here's the scale of C major, and here's the basic form of the A minor scale. That's what we call the A natural minor. Minor scales come in different flavours, but we don't need to worry too much about that here. Now, as you can see, those two scales basically have the same notes. It's just the white notes on the piano keyboard. The C major scale is all the white notes between any two Cs on the piano keyboard, and the A natural minor is all the white notes between any two As. So C major and A minor share their notes, which makes them relative keys. In effect, two sides of the same musical coin. Now, a song can very easily flip between the major sound and the sound of its relative minor, or vice versa, or even, as is the case in our song quite often, it can kind of walk a tightrope between the two. Structurally, the song is also really simple. We start with 4 bars of vamp. A vamp is just a chord pattern that you can repeat over and over until the singer is ready to come in. It's a really common device in jazz era songs that might be performed in a cabaret setting, because whoever is introducing the song can just talk, and then when it's time for the singer to come in, the piano player can run straight from the vamp into the main accompaniment. After that vamp, the song follows a basic AABA structure. Now, AABA is the most common song structure in classic jazz, and it's dead simple. You start off with a first A section that is 8 bars, 8 measures long, and in our song it starts at bar 5 with the words simple scalar melody. After that first A section, there's a second 8-bar A section, which is musically either the same or very similar to the first A section. In our song, it starts at bar 13 with the words, I don't want much complexity. And then at the end of that second A section, you might notice we've got another short section of vamp, which gives us a nice run into our B section, which always comes after the first 2 A sections. Now, the B section is also 8 bars long, but, and this is really, really important, the B section always offers a contrast to the A sections that have preceded it. So the melody will be different, the chord progression will be different, it might be in a different key, the words might have a different kind of meaning, all kinds of things can be different. B sections are actually really interesting. Our B section starts at bar 22 with the words, it's straightforward and unironic. Then when the B section ends, we get the final A section, which in our song starts in bar 29 with the words, short descending scale of C. Again, the final A section is like the previous A sections, but with some minor tweaks. And also, this is important, it ends on the vamp pattern again. It doesn't do this in every song, but it does it in a lot of them, and it certainly does it in ours. And that vamp pattern can either act as a turnaround, landing us on a dominant type chord, we'll come back to what those are shortly, to take us back to the start of the first A section for another run through the whole song, or you can use it like I did when I was playing it a few minutes ago as a run out, giving us an easy way to end the song. Okay, I hope you can see so far there's nothing madly complicated going on. Now, what's true at the high level of the song's key and structure is also true at a deeper level. Let's take a look at the melody. I want to start by thinking about what the tune does in the first 4 bars of the first A section. Remember, we're in the key of C major. We've got a simple scalar melody, okay, some crazy chords, but an easy key. Can you see what's going on there? Actually, the lyrics tell you what's going on. We've got a scalar melody. All the melody really does is come down a partial scale of C major, from G to C. Okay, there's a little turn at the end, easy key, but the overall trend is just that simple scalar pattern. And guess what? That is more or less all the tune does for the whole song. There are some variations, and in the B section, one of the ways we get contrast is by going up rather than down, but no further than to an A. For most of the song, all we're doing is coming down a C major scale. The illusion of complexity comes from the rhythms we're using and deeper down the chord choices I've made. We'll deal with the chords and the harmony in a few minutes, but for now let's think briefly about the rhythms in the melody because they have a big effect. Fundamentally, our song uses jazz rhythms. I'm not claiming it is jazz because people on YouTube can get very uptight about what is and isn't jazz, but let's at least agree that much of the song's basic engineering is taken from the jazz toolbox. The first clue we have is this swing marking at the top of the score. It's quite hard to define swing, but in its crudest sense, it means that the 8th notes, the quavers, are played alternately slightly longer and slightly shorter, and that the slightly longer ones are perhaps stressed a little. So if we were to sing the first section of melody exactly as it's written, without any swing at all, it would sound very straight and really completely wrong. We've got a simple scalar melody. When we swing it, it comes out like this. We've got a simple scalar melody, much more natural for the style. Swing also has some very subtle effects. So for example, another feature of the jazz style is that notes are often offset from the beat, as in melody. The middle syllable there is a full quarter note, a crotchet, and it straddles beat 1 and beat 2 of the measure. The thing is though, that quarter note is, in effect, 2/8, 2 quavers, tied together. And because we're swinging, this one is a little shorter and this one is a little longer, which also means that the note on the first syllable is a little longer too. It's really important to be aware of things like that, but not to go down the rabbit hole trying to work out precisely where each note needs to come relative to the beat. It's better and it's easier to get a sense of the swing and feel your way through. Listen to a lot of jazz and jazz style music and you'll soon make sense of what swing is, and then you should be able to sing or play this kind of pattern quite naturally without having to think too deeply about it. Swing also has some quite subtle effects when it's involved in anticipation, when a melody note or chord comes in slightly ahead of the beat, especially at the start of a bar. We'll discuss that in more detail in a moment. It can also create nice effects when it's paired with triplets. Now, in case you don't know, a triplet is where you take 3 notes of equal length and cram them into the space that would normally be taken up by 2, which gives you a really pleasing across the beat sound. Mix that up with swing and you get the effect we have in bar 13, this really kind of expansive sound. I don't want much complexity. Again, we'll be coming back to that bar because it's an important one. Like I said though, the thing with the melody here is to feel it rather than think about it too much. Take what's written in the score as an indication of what you should do, but you can pull around the rhythm, you can play around with the notes as much as you like. Keep the basic shape and spirit of the original, but make it your own. Turn off the targeting computer and use the force a little bit. Before we move on, I just want to take a moment to think about how this score actually works. I've called it an outline score, and I've designed it the way it is to give you the easiest, most flexible possible route to understanding how the song works and perhaps to coming up with your own performance of it. If you go and look at commercial sheet music for songs though, you'll find things are a bit different. Usually song sheets come in one of 2 forms. The first is piano vocal score, where you get a melody line, chords, lyrics and a piano part. More often than not, the piano part is relatively easy and it follows the melody, so you can play the song as a solo if you want to. But that's not much use if you want to perform the song, because in a real performance, the piano wouldn't simply play the melody behind the singer. But this kind of sheet music is what the commercial market wants, so it's mostly what's out there, and it can still be useful because it gives you a lot of information. The other main form of commercial sheet music is the lead sheet. That's where you just get the melody line, lyrics and chords, and it's up to you to improvise a solo or a comp from that. My outline score is kind of halfway between the two, in that there isn't a full piano part, but you've got quite a bit of other stuff in there, more than you would get in a lead sheet. So for example, I've used quite a few of these little kind of reverse hanging phrase marks to show you places where you could use rhythmic anticipation, that is, bringing in a chord ahead of a beat. There are quite a few of them in the introductory vamp, for example. So if we just look at these right hand chords in the first 4 bars, if I played them exactly on the beat, they would sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But typically I was timing them like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, bringing them in slightly ahead of the beat, and that translated out into an improvisation a bit like this. Okay, so that kind of rhythmic anticipation is another technique that's a really standard part of the jazz lexicon. If you are going to use anticipation, by the way, just be really careful that you don't accidentally drop half beats. So for example, you'll see that I've added a warning in the score on the bottom line of the first page where this happens. Really don't mean a thing, and that's fine because... I used some anticipation there when I was playing through, and when I listened back I had to check and count really carefully against the recording to make sure I had all the beats. It was fine, but it wasn't even easy to check. If you go back to the recording and try counting against it yourself, you might notice that. So do take care with your anticipations. It is really easy to lose bits of beat. Are you enjoying the tutorial so far? If you are, fantastic. Please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel where you'll find hundreds of tutorials just like this one. You might also be interested in some of the ways you can support what I do here on YouTube. For example, you might like my classic piano ebook bundle, or my set of piano packs, or even my latest book, How to Be a Better Musician, which is full of science-backed advice on how to get better quicker at making music. You'll find links to all of those products in the description text below and in the PDF that accompanies the lesson. You might also want to check out my Patreon over at patreon.com/BillHilton, where if you sign up for a low monthly cost, you get complimentary access to the piano packs, you get priority access to me personally if you have any questions about your piano learning, and you also get access to loads of exclusive member-only content. Check it out over at patreon.com/BillHilton. I'll be really glad to see you there. So now let's think a little bit about the chords and the harmony. Like I said, this song is fundamentally very simple, and much of what's creating the apparent complexity alongside the offset jazzy rhythms comes from the chord choices I've made, so they're worth discussing in a bit of detail. The first thing I want to say is please don't get hung up on chord symbols. We're dealing with some reasonably complex chords here, and as soon as you get into complex chords, you'll find situations where one chord could have several different names. A good example is this thing in bar 6, measure 6, that I've called G7 sus4. You could quite reasonably call that several other things, like G11 if you wanted to. The point about chord symbols is that they are a shorthand that developed among working musicians to give a quick and easy way of communicating harmonic ideas. There isn't a set standard, and they're not meant to be totally descriptive. If you need to write a really precise description of a complex chord, then the way to do that is with score. So a lot of what's making the chords in this song interesting comes down to the extensions I'm using. As you may know, you can take a basic chord like A minor, play it as a root position triad, so the note the chord is named after is at the bottom, then the third, then the fifth, all within one octave. And you can enrich it by stacking thirds on the top. We won't get into the exact mechanics of intervals here, but in practice with this chord, what we can do is start with the highest note of the chord and count up the C major stroke A minor scale in groups of 3. Always including the starting note in the 3. Really important when you're calculating intervals, always count the starting note, always include it. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 up from the top E, and that gives us G, which when we add it to the basic A minor chord delivers A minor 7. Then another 3 gives us 1, 2, 3, A minor 9, and another 3 gives us 1, 2, 3, A minor 11, and then another 3, 1, 2, 3, A minor 13. We can't go any further because we've now used all of the notes of the scale in our chord, and if we did go up another 3, we'd just get back to the root, to A. And then, like any other chord, you can take the notes of your extended chord, say A minor 7, and play them in lots of different voicings and inversions, shapes to put it in plain English. So that's A minor 7, that's A minor 7, we can put an E in the bass, that's A minor 7. You get a little bit of complexity with minor 7 chords because in some inversions they're the same as sixths chords. So you could call that C6 or A minor 7. Really, it's the same chord. Now, simple extended chords like sevenths are often, and in fact usually, played with all their notes. But once you get things like 11ths and 13ths, it's perfectly normal to miss things out. So this A minor 11 chord we have in bar 5 only uses the root, 3rd, 11th and 7th of the full chord. There's our full A minor 11, and there's the version that we're playing. We've got the root doubled down here in the bass. Sometimes you can even miss out the root note of the chord, the note that the chord is named after, and that gives us what we call a rootless voicing. So this C9 over E in bar 12 is a really good example of that. Here's a full C9 chord, or C dominant 9 to give it its posh name, and it has this B flat from outside the key, because it's leading us to an F chord. Let's not get into the precise dynamics of this, but when I play that C9 over E chord in the song, I do it like this: E in the bass, B flat, D, E and G. Rootless voicing, it's a type of C chord, but there's no C in there. Incidentally, it's also a slash chord. Songwriters and composers use slash chords when they want to specify a chord's inversion, in other words, which note is in the bass. The symbol is C9/E, which means we play a C9 chord, but we put an E down the bottom rather than the C that we usually expect. Sometimes heavily extended chords can be labelled in other ways. So we've already looked at this G7 sus4 in bar 6. That's actually quite simple to parse. It's a standard G7 chord, but instead of the 3rd, the B, we're suspending the 4th, C. To label it that way, I think, is a little bit clearer than calling it G11, as we could do, because C is the 11th degree above the root of the chord there, so we could call it G11, but harmonically I actually think it makes a tiny bit more sense to call it G7 sus4, because sus chords always omit the 3rd, okay, they always miss out the B in this case, and I think this chord actually functions slightly better. It gives us a slightly more natural rundown to the next chord, F major 7, in the overall kind of sonic context of the song, yeah? But like I said, chord symbols are kind of a blunt instrument, so let's not get too hung up on them. Far more interesting is the fact that once you start extending chords like this, you create quite a lot of interesting tensions and ambiguities in the sound. You can see a really good example of that if you compare the A minor 11 at the start of the first A section in bar 5 with the F6 add 9 at the start of the second A section in bar 13. Okay, 6 add 9 or 6/9 chords are highly specific types of extended chord where you take the basic chord and add a 6 and then the note that is 9th above the root, or the 2nd, but we call it a 9th because it's an extension, but you don't add any other extensions. Anyway, as you'll see, the A minor 11 from the first A section and the F6 add 9 from the second A section are almost the same chord. All I've done for the second one is move the bass note down from A to F. A minor 11, F6 add 9. Listen to the difference. A minor 11 sounds kind of neutral, almost a bit clinical, but the F6 add 9 is warmer, and I've used those contrasting sounds to back up the meaning of the words. So under the very kind of matter of fact, we've got a simple scalar is the very kind of neutral, clinical A minor 11. But when we get to I don't want much complexity, the sense is more kind of personal, kind of expansive and warmer, yeah? So F6 add 9 with its warmer sound underpins that better. Most of the chords we've looked at so far, however much they've been extended, have fundamentally been diatonic. In other words, they've been based on one of the 7 chords that we can grow out of the scale of the key we're in. So here's a C major scale because C major is our key, and if we take a basic root position triad shape and run it up that scale using only the notes of the scale, we can generate the following chords: C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, B diminished, and back to C at the top of the scale. In any song in the key of C major, most and maybe all of the chords will be taken from that list of diatonics, and they'll either be plain vanilla chords like C or F or G, or they'll be extended diatonically using only notes of the key scale, like our A minor 11 or F6 add 9. However, non-diatonic chords also get used a lot, and we've already seen one in the form of that C9 over E, the rootless voicing that we came across in bar 12. So a basic chord of C is obviously diatonic to the key of C, but the B flat in that C9 over E definitely isn't. There are several other non-diatonics in the song, and they get used in a few different ways. So, for example, they sometimes appear as substitute chords. Now, chord substitution happens in all kinds of genres of music, but it's a major technique in jazz. Substitution is where you take a basic diatonic chord from a chord progression and replace it with another chord, often non-diatonic, which does the same job in terms of moving the progression forward, but has a different, more interesting sound. In jazz at least, substitutions often happen on the dominant chord, the chord based on the 5th degree of the scale. As you might know, the function of the dominant chord, the chord built off the 5th degree of the scale of the key that you're in, so that's the chord G in the key of C major. Let's play it in that shape to make things a bit clearer. Its function, the job it does in any progression, is to kick off a cadence, some sort of resolution of tension in the music. And mostly, that resolution is back to the tonic chord, the 1 chord, the chord that the key is named after. So dominant, tonic, 5, 1, G, C. That's what we would call a perfect or an authentic cadence, but sometimes it goes somewhere else, okay? So from the 5 chord, we could also go to the 6 chord, A minor. Yeah? That's what we call a deceptive or interrupted cadence, because our ear expects from the 5 chord to go back to 1, but instead we're going up to 6. Now, the straightforward 5-1 cadence usually sounds a bit too neat and tidy, a little bit square for jazz, so that 5 chord often gets substituted, replaced with something cooler. Okay, and you can see that in action in bar 18, measure 18. In the previous bar, measure 17, we've got a D minor 7 chord, which is a setup for a classic 2-5-1 resolution. That's where we would round up a section of music by going from the 2 chord, D minor, to the 5 chord, G, to the tonic, C. And in this song it works like this. I only want a song that even I can sing. Just in the G chord, we've got that C suspended in there in the melody. But what actually happens is we go to the D minor 7 chord, and then instead of going to some sort of G chord with the C suspended in it, this happens. We get D minor 7 flat 5 over G, a slash chord. Can you hear how it has the same effect? It still wants to drag us back to the tonic, to C, but it sounds cooler, it sounds more interesting. D minor 7 flat 5 over G to C. Now, dominant substitutions can often seem wild and wacky and far removed from the substituted 5 chord, but they often have a lot in common with it. So in the key of C major, a strong basic 5 chord would be G7, the notes G, B, D and F. If you look at our substituted chord, it's still got 3 of those notes. Let's play it up here. We've still got G, D and F. Then we've got the C that's in the melody and the chord that we're resolving to, and we've got this non-diatonic A flat, but that's only a semitone, a half step from G. Okay, so it's a natural slide down to a chord note, and the tension naturally and easily resolves itself to a chord of C. Most substitutions work the same way. So, for example, the really famous tritone substitution, which would be D flat 7 over G or something like it in the key of C major, still contains several notes of an underlying G7 chord. So a G7 will be G, B, D, F. The tritone sub has still got G, F and B, plus 2 other notes that are right next to notes of the target chord, the chord that will resolve. Tritone substitution to C works just as naturally as a standard 5 or 5-7-1. Another way non-diatonic chords get used is to add colour and variety to songs, and in AABA jazz style material, non-diatonics are especially common in B sections, where, as is the case here, they get used to kind of drive a mini key change. So let's just have a quick run through our B section chords. like I've already said, the chords are just one of the ways in which the B section is a contrast to the A sections. The melody also changes slightly, and you might also have noticed that I slightly changed the piano comp to make it a little bit spikier. But it's the chords in this B section that really give it its contrasting character, although they do it in a way that takes us naturally and easily back to the start of the final A section, as we will see. Let's have a look anyway. So we start in bars 21 and 22 with chords that are basically diatonic. Underneath the words, it's straightforward and unironic. So A minor 11 and B minor 11. Now you might be saying, hang on Bill, B minor 11 is not a diatonic chord in the key of C major. And you well spotted, you're absolutely right. If you look at the underlying chord there, B minor, that's definitely not diatonic to the key of C major because it's got an F sharp, a note that doesn't appear in the C major scale. But I'm only playing it with diatonic notes. That voicing I've chosen only has notes that are diatonic to the scale of C major, and in particular I'm omitting the F sharp. Okay, if you wanted to, you could play it there in the progression as a standard B minor 7 chord and it would still work. It would just sound slightly different. You could also play the A minor 11 as an A minor 7. Okay, I just particularly like the sound of that chord followed by that chord. Okay, the real non-diatonic drama starts in bar 24 underneath the words non-diatonic chords. See how I've cunningly put the clue in the lyrics again. So first of all, there we have a B flat major 7 chord and then an E flat major 9 chord, and that all resolves out in the next bar to an A major 7. This is what we call a chromatic mediant modulation. Now these things get talked about all the time on YouTube like they're rocket science or magic or something, but really they're not. I think they're just a popular subject for videos because they've got a clever sounding name. A chromatic mediant chord is just a type of non-diatonic chord that's based on the 3 or the 6 chord of the underlying key's diatonics. So in C major, that's E minor, the 3 chord, or A minor, the 6 chord. And the technical names for those degrees of the scale are the mediant and the submediant, hence chromatic mediant. And all that's done to create a chromatic mediant is one of those chords is taken and shifted up or down a semitone, a half step, and usually has its tonality reversed, okay, from minor to major. So what's happened here, we've taken the A minor, the 6th chord of C major, shifted it up a semitone and made it major to give us B flat major, and we've added a 7th, yeah? It's a dramatic jump, but it doesn't sound wrong. This is the clever thing about chromatic mediants, yeah? They sound a bit crazy, but they also sound logical. And it also sends us off somewhere cool. We go from our B flat major 7 chord to our E flat major 9 to our A major 7. Okay, and that transition works mostly because of proximal notes, which we've talked about already, but also because once you've started changing key, the listener's ear kind of gets used to it. So to have another kind of dramatic key change after the one you've just had seems more logical. If we were to jump straight from our basic underlying chord of C and go straight to an A major 7, it could work, but it would be a very dramatic switch. So the chromatic mediant modulation has helped us get there kind of in a logical sounding way. Now getting to that A chord is useful because from there we can, like the lyrics say once again, hop onto the circle of fifths, because there's our basic A major 7 chord. From there we can jump to an A7 chord, okay, which isn't very much of a move at all, and that A7 chord takes us to a D9 chord and then to a type of G chord, a G13. So we're going down an interval of a fifth each time using 5/1 cadences, the things we talked about a few minutes ago. We go from an A chord down to a D chord, down an interval of a fifth, then down to a G chord, down an interval of a fifth again, and that G chord takes us naturally down to our tonic. We get our 5/1 resolution in our home key, C major. The only slight spanner in the works is that from that G13 chord in bar 28, we actually go back to A minor 11. Okay, so technically it's a deceptive cadence because we're going from a 5 chord to a 6 chord. Okay, but because of the key changes that have just preceded us, we're not really expecting a deceptive cadence, and it doesn't sound quite logical, or at least I didn't think so. So what I did was smooth out that transition by adding a passing chord. Yeah, I thought all the extensions were muddying the clarity of the cadence, basically. So I took the G13 chord, but instead of going straight to the A minor 11, I added this chord, which I'm calling A flat diminished 7. It's missing one of the notes of an A flat diminished 7. You could put a full A flat diminished 7 in there. I'm not sure you want to. Again, you could call that chord lots of different things. I'm labelling it that way. It just gives us a really natural rise up to our A minor 11 chord. So let's run through that from our A major 7 chord in bar 26. There's our A major 7. I was playing it in that voicing. It's a very, very short trip to A7. And that resolves us down the circle of fifths to D9, and that takes us down the circle of fifths to G13. And then instead of jumping straight to our A minor 11 chord, though you could if you want to, I'm putting in that passing chord. Yeah, A flat diminished 7, which takes us there really naturally. Can you hear that? And we're back at the start of the final A section. There's just one final harmonic thing I want to mention. In bar 29, measure 29, I've stuck a note in the score saying that you can try using a G pedal tone. Okay, now pedal tones can create a really cool effect, a real interest and drama and tension, especially if you use them towards the end of a song. All you have to do here to create the pedal tone is play the chords exactly as normal, but use a G as the bass note underneath all of them. At the end of a chord progression, yeah, as we are here, the most common note for a pedal tone is the 5th degree of the key scale, which is G for us. So have a listen to those chords. Again, I won't sing because I'm really throaty at the moment. Here we go. This is from chords from bar 29, measure 29. Okay, and then when you get to bar 33 and the kickoff of what is in effect a 2-5-1 sequence, you would jump down to the D of the D minor 7 chord. Did you also notice that cheeky little non-diatonic I put in there? Non-diatonic substitution. In other A sections where we've gone from E minor 7 to A minor 7, I've put in E minor 7 to E flat 6. Non-diatonic to C major, but it has the same function, just a little bit of variation in the sound. Yeah. Did you hear the effect of that pedal tone? Yeah, it's just pretty cool. Often the best way to get the most out of pedal tones is to kind of make them sing out just a little bit. Not so much that they're drowning the voice out or whatever, but just so that the listener is kind of aware of them. Now, if you're going to play around with this song for yourself, one of the most useful things it can do for your practical piano playing is help you improve your comps. A comp is an improvised or semi-improvised accompaniment to a melodic line. Now, one of the good things about this song is that you can actually comp it really easily. If you want to, you can just use static, straightforward block chords. And mostly that's what I did, although I did use, as we've seen, some rhythmic anticipation, and in the B section, I used that offset rhythm that I've marked in the score. But you could try other stuff as well. So like a really obvious thing to try might be a stride pattern in the left hand with kind of staccato jabby chords in the right, yeah? Something like this. Getting a little bit carried away there, but did you see what I was doing? So the stride pattern is really simple. We're kind of breaking our chord up and playing a low bass note and then usually a cluster of high notes. Not necessarily the full chord, although you could do if you wanted to. I was just doing something like this, making sure I was getting my suspended sound on the G there. Really quite simple. The thing with stride patterns is to try to be accurate, because it's really easy to miss the notes, especially actually in the top part of the chord. It's easier to get the bottom note, I find anyway, but you can often splash things a little bit on the top part. That doesn't matter so much, and the style is so busy that often people don't notice, but do try to be precise. And in the right there, I was just kind of jabbing around, yeah, and I used a little bit of cheesy tremolo there. Everyone loves a cheesy tremolo. What you might find with stride is that because the stride is happening down here, you haven't got room to play the chords down here, so you have to play them up here, where they're maybe just a bit too controlling, that they kind of dominate the voice maybe a bit too much. You could try the pattern a bit further down, you just have to compress the stride a little bit. That could work perfectly well. You wouldn't want to get too low because things will get very muddy and chunky. The thing about comping is that, and this goes for all styles of music, the trick is to offer support to the sung line, but also a subtle contrast. This is just one style, but it certainly holds true here. We're kind of supporting the sung line, but the piano is definitely kind of second fiddle, as it were, if I can. Is that a mixed metaphor? I guess it is. But I'm offering a slight contrast, just a little bit of extra interest, because the voice is the star of the show. And like I said, one of the ways I've kind of engineered this song is so that you can actually comp super simply and it'll still be effective. You can just figure out the chords, using the diagrams in the PDF or just copying what I'm doing and just play block chords. But as you get used to it, maybe singing along, humming along, or even, God help you, trying to accompany my performance of it, then just see what interest you can create, and often it can be very, very subtle things and it will still be an effective comp. So you could just try arpeggiating the chords, spreading them out like this. That will create an effect, or playing around with the rhythms like I was doing. It's when you're comping that things like articulation and dynamics make a big, big difference, because those are the subtle little things that just give the comp its character. So take the chords, play around with them, and don't even think about it too hard. Just, play through a few times and see what your fingers start doing. Just a couple of final things. First of all, have a think about what you're doing with the pedal. You will probably find that you need a touch of sustain pedal on the chords in the A section, remembering to re-pedal on chord changes, and in the circle of fifths part of the B section. Okay, the first part of the B section, I will play without a sustain pedal, again because it gives us a little bit of a contrast. I can't give you hard and fast advice about the sustain pedal because on different pianos it will have subtly different effects. So as always, try pedaling in different ways and use your ear to judge the outcome. Finally, always remember, I always say this and I'm sure people never listen, but I'm going to say it anyway, think about the musical side of things. Playing the piano isn't just about pushing buttons, it's about controlling, for example, your expression and dynamics. So don't just blast this song out. Vary the dynamics, even if just a little bit, make it a little bit louder, a little bit softer, maybe try making the A sections soft and the B section loud or something like that. And think carefully about the way you phrase and articulate things and what you're trying to express. And if you're singing, that should inform the way you're singing the words as well. Try to always to think through the meaning as you are singing the words. It makes, believe it or not, a big difference. It's these seemingly simple things that turn something, that could be quite mechanical and dull into something that sounds like music. Okay, now if you want to beef up your chord knowledge, which is always going to help you with this kind of integrated approach to learning music theory, I strongly suggest you check out this tutorial, which is jam-packed with advice on practical harmony. I'll see you over there.